How many religions in the world do you believe to be false?
I don't know how many religions in the world there are, so I
Well,
get
could
it.
you name... Right. Fair enough. I'll see if I can't narrow that down. That was a clumsily asked question, I admit. Do you regard any of the world's religions to be false?
Excuse me?
Do you regard any of the world's religions to be false preaching?
Yes, I think, yeah, certainly.
Would you name one then?
Islam.
Right, that's quite a lot.
Pardon me?
That's quite a lot.
Yes.
Do you think it's moral to preach false religion?
No.
So religion is responsible for quite a lot of wickedness in the world right there.
Certainly.
Right.
I'd be happy to concede that. I would agree with that.
So if I was a baby being born in Saudi Arabia today, would you rather I was me or a Wahhabi Muslim?
Would I be? Rather be what?
Would you rather it was me? It was an atheist baby or a Wahhabi baby?
I don't have any preference as to whether you would.
You do. As bad as that. Okay. Sorry, I've only got a few seconds. It's a serious question. I shouldn't squander it. Are there any Christian denominations you regard as false?
Certainly.
Could I know what they are?
Well, I'm not a Calvinist, for example. I think that certain tenets of Reformed theology are incorrect. I would be more in the Wesleyan camp myself. But these are differences among brethren. These are not differences on which we need to put one another in some sort of a cage. So within the Christian camp, there's a large diversity of perspectives. I'm sure there are views that I hold that are probably false. But I'm trying my best to get my theology straight, trying to do the best job, but I think all of us would recognize that none of us agree on every point of Christian doctrine, on every dot and tittle.
Before Mr. Hitchens succeeds in launching another series of religious wars among Christians, let's get to the...
It amazes me that it doesn't bother you that we spend $2 trillion in a war we should have never been in. You just worry about paying the chaplains to pray over it.
Yeah, well, you see, I don't love our enemies, and I don't love people who do love them. I hate our enemies, and I think they should be killed. And I think that they want to kill me. And I think we could do it probably with half the budget, or maybe twice, but I'm absolutely sure that there should be no country that has a budget that could threaten ours. And I'm not sentimental about the point. I wanted to have another whack at that very question now.
So the people that preach God and love should shut up and remain private, but killers ought to just go and just kill people that they call their enemies. That's very ethical. And
the people who preach Allahu Akbar, the people who preach Allahu Akbar had better find out that there's a stronger force than them, and one that also has unalterable convictions and principles, and that can also be offended, and that they're offended at their peril. That's what I think.
Mr. Hitchens, you stated that some of your most strongly stated arguments are that the results of religion, violence, death, destruction, the motivation being religion, discredit those who would promote a belief in God. However, I think there's an imbalance there in that the nuclear bomb was created by physicists and is the most demonstrable violence perpetrated on mankind. So I wonder how you respond to that.
Well, physics isn't an ideology. Physics isn't a belief system. It's a science.
Well, I think that would be subjective.
I mean, you could, any more than the Marie Curie discovering radium makes her practice morally different. I mean, it's not comparing like with like. What I'm talking about are specific religious injunctions to do evil, to mutilate the genitalia of children, for example, to take the pastor, Douglas Wilson, who Dr. Craig was just mentioning, with whom I crossed swords several times this year and recently in Dallas. I happened to be mentioning to him about the commandment to exterminate the Amalekites in one of our debates, and he said that commandment is still valid. If there were any Amalekites, it would be his job to make sure that they were all put to the sword. and some of the virgins left over for slavery, purposes better imagined perhaps than described. I think this is a very serious problem. I'm not taking refuge in the commonplace that sometimes religious people behave badly, that would discredit religion. That would be a very soft option. I'm saying there are specific biblical scriptural injunctions to do evil.
After the commandments specified in Exodus chapter 20 comes Exodus 21, a chapter of so-called judgments, which gives the verdict and sentence in advance for any number of crimes, from smiting to slave rebellion, and from ox goring to witchcraft. And these two have the forces of commandment, and the penalty in all cases is death. Moses then returns from his audience with God to discover his people have lapsed into calf worship and other frivolities. As I mentioned earlier, he thereupon smashes the two tablets, which would surely at that time have been the most precious artifact that could possibly have been known to man, as having been conceived and made wholly by God, smashes them and summons the Levites of his contingent to inflict exemplary punishment. And I quote now from Exodus 32, verses 27 to 28. Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, so this too is a divine commandment, by the way. Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, put every man his sword by his side, and go in and out from gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay every man his brother, and every man his companion, and every man his neighbor. And the children of Levi did according to the word of Moses, and there fell of the people that day about 3,000 men. So that's a terrific slaughter under orders. And you note the small inconsistency, which may perhaps, I sometimes think, betray the prickings of a poor conscience. In the first verse, the order for the indiscriminate slaughter is from God, thus saith the Lord God of Israel. In the second, it's from Moses. The children of Levi did according to the word of Moses. There's a bit of displacement going on here, we don't know. In either case, it orders the killing of brothers, companions, and in that significant term, as we've seen from the 10th commandment, neighbors, specified. They must die without pity or without discrimination. That's not excessive, perhaps, after the infanticide of the firstborn of Egypt that's already taken place for them to get this far, and it pales beside the anger of Moses in the later book of Numbers, where he speaks to his generals after the battle against the Amalekites and rages at them for sparing so many of the civilians. Now, therefore, he says, kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman that has known a man by lying with him. But all those women, children that hath not known a man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves. In the Age of Reason, Thomas Paine drew attention to this passage, saying that it constituted, I'm quoting Paine, an order to butcher the boys, to massacre the mothers, and to debauch the daughters. A fairly good summary of what I've just read. And this earned him a hurt and high-minded rejoinder from the Bishop of Llandaff, a blithering Welshman who used to try to debate Paine on these questions. He didn't contest the butchery of the boys or the massacre of the mothers, but he did say very plaintively that it wasn't actually stipulated that the daughters were being kept alive for immoral purposes. In other words, the bishop left open the possibility they were being kept as, I suppose, pets.
In fact, the studies I've seen says that religious people have more fun with sex than people who are not religious, and it's actually shows that they are more sexually satisfied in marriage and so forth. So I think the question makes a good point.
I think I have to have another bite at this. This tempting cherry. You see, if it's true that, as I think it is, that nature is pretty indifferent, pretty callous, pretty random, then who is the designer? But many people say concerning the ban on homosexuality, for example, in the Old Testament, they'll say, well, homosexuality is against God's law and it's against nature's law. Well, in that case, why does nature see to it that so many people are born homosexual? Or, if you want to rephrase it, why does God have so many of his children preferring sex with their own gender? It doesn't help. It doesn't, in clarifying and elucidating this, it doesn't help to assume a supernatural authority. Whereas, if you look at the reasons given by Maimonides and the other sages for the practice of circumcision, it is precisely to dull and to blunt the sensation of an organ which I don't think even, well, I'll leave it there.
Our next question.
It's explicitly designed, in other words, to reduce sexual pleasure, make it more of a painful duty than a celebration.
But he devoted his life to his religion. Do you have nothing good to say about him at all? No, I repeat, Jerry Falwell lived on hatred and superstition and bigotry. He preached dislike of people whose lives he knew nothing about. He raised money from credulous fools.
You don't know anything about his life.
Now, excuse me, sir. You can either ask me on and ask my opinion, or you may not. But I don't have to be here if you're going to take that attitude.
Well, you could leave.
You spent the first half by saying I had no right to the opinion you'd asked me on to express. Now you're tiring me out. I repeat, though.
No, what I said is your opinion was thoughtless. What you wrote was crude and mean and hateful. That's what I said.
You took up all the time for my answer with your long, rather unlettered question.
Oh, okay.
Jerry Falwell made a career out of sponsoring dislike and superstition, said that people he didn't like were going to hell, said the United States deserved to be attacked by Islamic fascists, said he believed that people would be raptured into heaven, leaving all the rest of us to wallow behind. I think his death is a deliverance. And if you say that someone who occasionally makes a charitable donation is a good person, then you have to say that Hamas and Hezbollah, who do all this charitable giving and charitable organizing, are the same.
In a country that celebrates it, Ralph Reed.
Sean, you know, look,
and why not a word now from the friend of Jack Abramoff?
Wait, we only have a moment here, Ralph. Here's an important question about. Well, let me get Ralph in here. Here's an important question about Jerry Falwell.
That's all it needs now.
Ralph,
let's hear from the Abramoff faction.
We only have a moment left. Ralph gets to speak too.
Artists. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Hold on, Christopher.
We're faced with the preposterous proposition that religion are either all of them true, or none of them true, or only one exclusive preachment is true. And none of these seem to me coherent, and all of these seem to be the outcome of a man-made cult. Assume that all of them were discredited at the same time, all of our problems would be exactly what they are now. How do we live with one another? Where indeed do morals and ethics come from? What are our duties to one another? How shall we build the just city? How shall we practice love? How shall we deal with the baser, what Darwin called the lowly stamp of our original origins, which comes not from a pact with the devil or an original sin, but from our evolution as well. All these questions, ladies and gentlemen, would remain exactly the same. Emancipate yourself from the idea of a celestial dictatorship, and you've taken the first step to becoming free. Thank you.